And this is all part of our work. And the work here is just simple. We exist to support families facing autism and other intellectual disabilities. And it is the fact that all of us, the creator who created us and formed us and shaped us, has designed for us to not to be by ourselves and to be part of community. And so he's enabled us today to share again one of the topics that I always do, which is Ask the Expert. And I always try to bring on people who are walking the journey. Either they're living it or they're promoting it in terms of supporting our families, connecting our families, educating our families. So as we design the work, I have been privileged and honored. To me, was so, I mean, ever so often, and I'm going to be very transparent. And for those of you who know me, you know that I wear my emotions on my sleeve, but not always. But in this season of life that I'm walking right now, I'm just overjoyed to know that God has placed certain people in my life, and they've been there as pillars. And you don't realize the impact of that pillar and how it's a core of support until you feel like you can't stand strong and you lean against it. And when you lean against it, that's when you really feel the impact of that pillar. And this is off the cuff. I didn't plan to say this, but it's just to make the point that we all need pillars in our lives. And those pillars are designed by the creator to be there as cores. So from moment to moment, we can hold on to them. And I am so blessed that I have an amazing woman with me today, who I just call her an incredible force. And, you know, her name is Cherie. Cherie, by the way, because my first name starts with Genevieve, my maiden name is actually Forson. In my church, people call me the G-Force. They call me the G-Force because when you step on my toe, especially when it relates to my kids and my families, oh, the force comes out. It just like that lion just goes like, yeah, don't mess with this woman. So I just say that just so that you know. And I'm just gonna try to pin you and I so that we're on there side by side, pin you and pin myself. So we're on here for the pin. So there's the two of us here. So I am so honored to have Cherie Castellano with me today. And I'll have her do her intro because you do such a, she's humble, but Cherie, please don't, put aside the humility here and just tell her like it is. This is one of those places where you can just tell it how you've led. No barriers, no restrictions, no anything. As God lays it on your heart to say it, because this was ordained as a time. A month ago, I was sitting there like, okay, what topic am I going to do for the Ask the Expert? And I was incredibly blessed to be invited by Cherie to an amazing launch of her own organization. And while I was there, I was listening and I just felt led to ask her afterwards, would you mind coming and sharing with my people? And she is our people. And so in the room today is two amazing people, Chris. We're in Zoom, but we're also broadcasting live on Facebook and also on YouTube, which will be enduring. So this will stay for people to watch it later. Two incredible women who have joined me also in the room, Chris and Deranke, who I absolutely love. These are two amazing, strong women who are here with us as well too. And I'm so glad, Chris and Ade, for you to join inside because, and if you're watching us on Facebook, please text and note it there as well too. Our program coordinator, Janet, is watching out and we'll also call you out for families out there. And if you're not on our bus called the My Goal Autism Family Bus, and it's It's not just for autism, by the way, because any individual that needs support is part of the family. If you're on this journey with us, I want you to know that you are part of a network. You are part of a family. You are part of a tribe. You are not alone, and you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And so on this season of life, as you're walking the journey, know that this program is designed for you. I met Cherie through a dear friend, Barbie Zimmerman Beer, she and I worked at St. Peter's University Hospital. I'll plug St. Peter's because that gave me foundation when we first started this organization, and it allowed us to just do whatever we needed to do with no restrictions. And at the time, Barbie was connected to Cherie, and she connected us. And I was sharing with my team just a few minutes ago that in pivotal moments of life, I leaned onto this pillar. She's one of my pillars. And that's because when you hear the work that she's doing, and she's also connected my goal and the organization and the work that we've done, and there's more to come. So I'm so excited because last month after she and I connected, I just know God has another chapter for us to do together. And so if you're listening and watching, you're part of that journey with us. So on that note, I just want to welcome you, Cherie. I love you. I appreciate you and just the amazing person that you are, and the blessing you are to so many people. If you don't know it and you didn't hear it recently, you are valued, you're appreciated, you're saluted, and you're honored. Because I just really believe to whom, we have to honor the people God has placed in our lives. And you have that, and you're in your humility continue to walk the journey. And so just know that there are a number of women, number of people, and who are just appreciative of all the work you do. So as I've spent this time to just acknowledge and just say thank you, I just invite you to share. And she and I are going to co-pilot. I'm going to be controlling her slides for her. So if you hear next slide, don't mind us. This is what we do. This is what these women do. So once again, I want to welcome Pat. Thank you for joining Ade and Chris, and just thank you all for being in the room. And we'll have time at the end to ask questions. And if you want to get connected with Cherie, she's just as available to you as she is to me. So please feel that way. So Cherie, welcome to
Thank
Ask
you.
the Expert.
Welcome so much, Genevieve. I'm speechless. So I want to say right back at you, because in the essence of time, you are certainly my pillar and inspiration. And it's been over a decade that I've been blessed to walk beside you and watch your work with my goal. And I have been waiting patiently for the time that God led me to an opportunity to really do more with you. And I think we're going to find that in 2023 together. So excited to be here. So as you mentioned, I'm here to talk a little bit about volunteer, but I really want to talk about us. And I guess to start, I want to share a little bit about myself and how I'm part of the My Goal family. So, I'm a mental health clinician. We all have these different hats like you are, and, as a clinician and professional. And according to the last 20 years of my work, I think it's fair to say that I have devoted my career to peer support. And really because I wanted to serve people who served others. I wanted to use innovations to help people with their mental health challenges. But it's mostly because I believe in the power of being connected to somebody else who has the same lived experience as you, and how that can be so transformational. Has it been as it has been for you and I, and for so many of the families at My Goal over the years. So after 25 years of working at Rutgers, running a bunch of peer support programs, I first studied looking at trauma and how it affected people who care for others. I started cop to cop and vet to vet, and ultimately, I have two sons, but my youngest son was diagnosed with a developmental disability, and I started Mom to Mom, which is for family rescuers. I say, we moms are first responders for our families and our children. We rescue everyone every day. But, just sort of non-traditional rescuers. Care to caregivers is for people who care for the elderly. But all of these programs that I lead in sort of my other hat, not in volunteer, but in my work at Rutgers, have always been focused on providing real, authentic support and helping people to heal and move forward after exposure to trauma. The model that I'm known for sort of internationally is called reciprocal peer support. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, but we have a special program to share with just those of you at My Goal that's coming out of Volunteer as part of this collaboration. But the reason why the peer support model that I created is called reciprocal peer support, it just relates to something you just said, Genevieve, which is, you know, as we serve others, we are served. You know, there's a reciprocity in how strong we are together. And so, you know, you reach out and connect to me, whether it was with Mom to Mom or the Glass Book Project, or inspire me with your faith and your culture. And then I can help you with something with your child or with your organization. So there's a reciprocity in that compassionate connection. And, you know, as a researcher and clinician, the models that I have designed are evidence-based and have gotten attention as national best practices. But I think what brought me back to you, although I was never away from you, just kind of watching you from afar, was that I had a crisis in my life, you know, similar to the when I started Mom to Mom. It was the crisis of trying to understand how to navigate being a special needs mom and how to work with other moms to make my family and myself whole and understand the blessing of having a special needs child. I was getting ready to retire. I was turning 60. My kids are in college. By the way, my son, who I was told was never going to speak and was going to be institutionalized by the time he was 18, is in college. He's an honor student. He's an orientation leader. He supports other college students with disabilities. And he'll be graduating and going on to graduate school. Just a happy, blessed young man. So praise God for that. But I was kind of at a place in my life where I thought I had it all together momentarily. And I suddenly had a tragedy. My house had a fire. My dryer caught on fire and it hit a gas line and it basically blew up my house and destroyed my home and everything I owned. And that was on March 9th. It was actually 7 months ago today that that fire happened. And I had always been on the other side of helping people after 9/11 and after crises and after disasters as a trauma counselor and a peer support expert. But now this was our family in crisis. But what I came to find is that this crisis, much like what we experience as special families, it broke me for a little bit, but it's actually building me, allowing me to build myself and my family and my spirit and my ministry back stronger. So I just want to acknowledge that that happened and say, I found myself calling myself a survivor. Survivor, not just of sort of, you know, the work that I do with mental health or some of the challenges I've had being a special needs mom, but the survivor of the fire, and thinking about how many people have had really bad things happen in their lives, much worse than this, because praise God, my family is alive. Even my dog who had passed away, the firefighters brought my dog back to life. So bravo for the volunteer firefighters. But I started to think about how our lives can change in a moment and what that means for us, especially as a special need, you know, family member. And so I was watching television and I was a little depressed, honestly, eating potato chips and not getting off the couch a few months ago. And I watched the Today Show and a clip caught my eye. And I thought I'd start the story off today by sharing that clip with you. Wait, before I do that, I'm so sorry, I jumped ahead. Go back one if you don't mind for me, Genevieve. I just want to say for a moment that for all of you who are watching now and will be watching, I think what's always magnificent about having the opportunity to do peer support and work with families and organizations like My Goal is that everyone is so unique. We're uniquely blessed, uniquely wonderful. Our children are unique. So I just want to read this quick poem. You are a miracle walking. I greet you with wonder in a work which seeks to own your joy and your imagination. You have chosen to be free every day as a practice. And I can never know the struggles you went through to get here, but I know that you have swum upstream and at times it has been lonely. I want you to know that I honor the choices you made in solitude. I honor the work that you've done to belong. I honor your commitment to that which is larger than yourself and your journey to love the particular container of life that is you. You are enough. Your work is enough. You are needed. Your work is sacred. You are here, and I am grateful. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart as we spend these next few moments together. Now to the videotape, Genevieve. Thank you.
For my talk of the table, I have a big question, not for Tony or Gil, but for you at home. Do you ever think about changing your job without knowing where it may lead? This morning, our lead national correspondent, David Begum, I know Gil.
That's funny. I said yes, and Gil said no.
Yeah, he introduces us to a popular news anchor in New Orleans, Karen Swinson, who's doing just that. After a very long and successful career, she's walking away from her job at the CBS affiliate, WWL, saying she is trusting the universe.
When WWL-TV paid its final tribute to its beloved lead anchorwoman.
She made the newsroom a more fun place and a nicer place every single day.
Karen Swinson paid tribute to the long list of people whose stories she told.
I will never forget you. The Lytle family, the mother and both of her children who beat devastating brain tumors, the Slack family from the lower Ninth Ward, who lost everything but what really mattered in Katrina. You taught me about faith and family and resilience.
But missing in that narrative was her own list of hardships.
So let's go back to 2005.
Oh my God, 2005. Right before we got married, my husband and I got married, they found a benign tumor. So 6 weeks before my wedding, to the day, I had massive surgery. And they told me during that surgery, you may never have children.
But medical advances helped to change that when she gave birth to a daughter. That same year, Hurricane Katrina wiped out New Orleans. And while she reported from the only local TV station able to stay on the air, her own home was destroyed.
And I went down this rabbit hole for really years, just missing the house that we had lost, the friends we had lost, the way of life that we had lost.
She ended up leaving New Orleans for a dream job anchoring a morning show in her native Boston. But she and her family longed to be back in the Big Easy.
And in 2011, we moved back to New Orleans. And my husband, 6 months later, was diagnosed with advanced cancer. I thought, oh my God, what is happening? My daughter was only 9.
John, the New Orleans police detective and love of her life, died 6 years later.
I've been through a lot of life's changes. And if I can help somebody else navigate it a little bit easier, then there's a purpose for all of it. That's a saying in New Orleans, ain't there no more.
That purpose has helped to push her to walk away from a successful career on television and run a company called Life's About Change. It's her company, her idea, to sell products that are made by people who've changed their lives.
Methamphetamine. I started at the age of 15, went to prison at the age of 20. I had my first child at 16, and I didn't know how to navigate that. And so I started using opiates at 18.
Jenna and Amanda are now successful potters who imprint Karen's line of coffee mugs with words to live by.
We have faith, kindness, peace. We're living testimonies of what a life can look like changed.
So the idea with the candles is what?
So the idea from the candles came from a doctor who was helping my husband and I to navigate his cancer journey. And the day he was diagnosed, she said, I want you to go get a candle. And then I want you to watch the wax disappear. And the wax are your cancer cells. She said, visualize it.
What's your intention for folks who buy the candle from you?
I hope that they see the flame and they think about their own inner strength.
Life's About Change started as a t-shirt company.
This might be my favorite. Time for change. Single again.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Swinson.
For several years now, Karen Swinson has juggled that job at WWL-TV with finding special vendors.
The candles that we have, those are created by an American veteran, joins the military at 33 because she's decided it's time to give back.
And that seems to me to be the underlining of the company.
That's it.
It's the focus on the present and the gratitude and the joy that comes with it.
Always look for the positive, or at least try to be in a state of joy. It will help you navigate it. So when my husband was sick, we looked for the person who beat it. When he passed, I looked for the widow who was still smiling.
Oh, Karen's website is filled with stories like that. But there is one story not there, the one that hit hard after her appendicitis.
So as I'm recuperating and I pull up the pathology reports and fully expecting them to be fine, and it said carcinoma. And I was like, no way. And all of a sudden they said, had you not had this other pain, your appendix, that kind of cancer is so insidious that by the time you usually find it's over. I don't like even speaking about it because to me, it gives it strength.
Gives it some power.
And that's why I never talked about it before, honestly.
But did that period help drive you to give the final word to your boss that I'm hanging it up?
This twist of fate that has saved my life.
Right.
Right? So yes, and you start thinking, maybe it's time to untether yourself from the desk and just sort of blindly go out there and just trust the universe. So it is not goodbye. I am not leaving New Orleans. I'm just pivoting. Life is about change, and it is time I live up to the mantra. So here we go, a new adventure after one heck of a ride. So thank you, New Orleans. Here's to you. Cheers.
David, once again,
Thanks so much, Genevieve.
most amazing people. I'm thinking about
My talk of the table.
Thank you. So I think, when I was watching this and thinking about how my life changed, in the blink of an eye, God saved me and my family to allow us to, my plane got delayed. My son went to a later movie. My husband woke up my son to walk the dog. All these things happened so that we wouldn't be in the house when it blew up. And even though we lost everything, it certainly gave us a chance to think about what God has in store for us when we go through a crisis and we're able to, offer ourselves more to serving him and to serving each other. So this next video is something I made and submitted, and you'll find it now on Karen Swenson's Life About Change, but I'll let you play that one too, if you don't mind, Genevieve, my technical support there. Thank you.
Sure, 1 second.
My name is Cherie Castellano, and my life's about change and connection and how giving and receiving can foster healing. Growing up in New Jersey, I was a typical Jersey girl, pretty blessed and happy, but my grandpa developed bipolar disorder and was institutionalized. And I volunteered to bring him Sunday macaroni as part of our Italian tradition. And what I found was that in that volunteering, not only did it help him and the people around him, but it also made me feel special. And I really loved the experience. That inspired my career in mental health as a clinician and ultimately as a leader in peer support programs, where my focus was really thinking about those who serve others and how to help them. I saw that cops and firefighters, moms of disabled kids, child protection workers, nurses, teachers, even clergy often suffered silently while helping others. I thought about how this shared lived experience could impact them and help them. And I created a model called Reciprocal Peer Support, which basically is a structure to teach people how to use their lived experience to serve someone else. And it's reciprocal, both parties benefit from it. During my time in the mental health field, I really have been blessed with a lot of success and loved watching the transformation that this healing connection offered for those in need. Actually, I spent 23 years doing this and realized that it was time to maybe think about, as I approached my 60th birthday, retirement and moving on with my kids in college. And suddenly we had a tragedy in my life. Our house had a terrible fire and it destroyed our home and everything we owned. And my life changed again. And in that change, I recognized that people wanted to also help us in this whole reciprocity concept of giving and receiving. And so even one of the people who came right after the fire, a fire inspector, told me about a suicide in his department, and I was able to give him the fire peer number. one of the contractors told me about he and his wife struggling with a disabled child, and I gave him the mom peer number, and I thought, this is no coincidence. I thought of the scripture, wherever two or more are gathered, there I will be. So in that context, I recognized in the days that followed that over 700 people not only made donations to us, but said with heartfelt messages, you helped us, let us help you. And it was really a powerful experience. Even one of the gals who had lost her house in a fire came to see me and normalized what I was going through. Anyway, I'm at my house, my temporary housing here, watching the Today Show, and I see Karen's segment on Life's About Change. And I thought, it's time for me to use my peer support expertise to help others in a more profound way. I think that right now we're in an unprecedented mental health crisis in our country, and it's too much for the providers and the systems to handle alone. So I think we need some other options. We need to connect as peers. We need to what I call volunteer. My new organization called Volunteer is a nonprofit that is focused on developing and offering peer support services in our communities so that we can foster healing together in a simple way, as a simple solution. Like Karen says, in Life's About Change, we serve others through what we've learned in overcoming our own challenges. And in turn, we're served. We're stronger together. So I'll end with my favorite quote by Helen Keller. Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it. And we can overcome the suffering that's happening now. We can volunteer because life's about change. Hello, my name is. Thanks so much, Genevieve. So that's kind of the story of the moment, that, this volunteer project is brand new. I was blessed and called to connect to all of you at my goal, and to Genevieve, because I believe that peer support is already happening in a very powerful and spiritual and unique way amongst you. And so I want to bring my expertise to help build that out in this upcoming year. But the reason why I created Volunteer, although I love all the programs I lead in my work life, and there's a lot of good experiences out there, many of us, especially since COVID, have experienced some form of isolation, again, particularly unique with our families struggling with disabilities. Change is something that's difficult for our children and for us as families. My experiences are that although there are resources, they're often limited, especially for mental health support, or sometimes I'll reach out to people who they don't understand my journey. I think that for sustainability and for cultural competence, we need to have volunteer partner with organizations like My Goal. And that sometimes when we have crises, they create opportunities. In the Chinese language, the actual symbols for crisis is danger and opportunity. And so I think that that's a true statement, at least for me in my most recent crisis, that prompted the origin of Volunteer. Next slide. So what is Volunteer? Basically the mission is to get, give, and grow peer support. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, Genevieve, because I don't want it to feel like a sales pitch. I think a big reason for me doing Volunteer is that I want to develop peer support for groups of people like the families at My Goal for free, right? That's the point of the nonprofit, is that I want to partner with organizations like yours and be in communities where peer support is already a focus to get us through each day. And now maybe we can just do that a little bit more robustly if we're together. So to get volunteer support, you can go to my website. It's volunteer.us. And there's a form. You basically fill out a form and say, I'm a mom, I'm a, survivor of a fire, I'm a survivor of, whatever you're a survivor of, and I will find a peer counselor who matches up with you and offer you support. But the goal to get volunteer support is really to connect to somebody, maybe initially by phone or over the computer, but eventually face to face, to allow ourselves to not feel alone. Next slide. I think giving volunteer support gets back to that reciprocity concept that I talked about. Over the 20 years plus I've been working in peer support, so many of the peer counselors say, oh my goodness, I get so much more than I give. I love doing this because every time I share my experience, it reminds me of what I've overcome, reminds me of my resilience. So giving to others in my community really makes me feel affirmed and good. So you can go to the website and just sign up to be a volunteer. But I think we're going to really do this through my goals. So you probably won't have to get on this website at all. But the idea is that you can receive peer support or you can give it. Next slide. The final part is where my goal and volunteer intersect, and that's growing volunteer support. I think where there are already successful groups happening, where people can share openly, they can vent, they can pray, they can cry, they can do whatever they need to do as peers. These groups sort of organically evolve. And over time, some of what I'm able to do is come in and kind of bring that next level of peer support to the group who are supporting each other. And that's the consultation and collaboration I'll be doing with Genevieve in the Volunteer My Goal program. So what is the model? Really quickly, sometimes people get offended when we talk about our special children and families as something we've survived. We know we thrive, we know we're blessed, we know we're able. So, there's a lot of things around language that can be offensive, but I want to call this survivor-informed peer support because I do think we're going to use what we've survived and our resilience and our faith to pay it forward to someone else. So in this survivor-informed peer support, I've created structure that you'll be, learning as part of this collaboration and that we'll be sharing as part of this collaboration. But I really wanted to focus on specific groups who I thought maybe were really struggling and needed an extra hand beyond the typical mental health stuff. So survivors of fire like us after the fire, we really needed more help than we received, honestly. People who survive floods or mass violence, it's a crazy world now. Homelessness, anything that destroys your home and your life makes you a survivor of a disaster. First responders are survivors. There are trauma survivors, medical group, people are survivors of cancer, right, and illness, and also people who are survivors of, having a family member who has an experience that, has to do with a disability, autism, medical illnesses, the combination of things that we all face in our population. So you must be a survivor of one of these areas. Next. And so in this kind of movement, I'm going to call volunteer movement at the moment, we understand that the survivor connections are profound. Genevieve talked about being, having a short list of pillars, people who she goes to in moments. She's mine also in a foundation I stand on. But I think those connections, they don't have to be frequent, but they're profound. They're profound because they're moments when we fully feel understood. They emphasize our strength and our need for self-care. They're confidential, they help us deal with stigma that we feel on the outside from the world because we understand each other. They're trauma informed because we do experience trauma in this journey, and they promote support, which is always good, and encourage wellness and resilience. Next. So peers are different than counselors or therapists or life coaches or, peers support choice and hope and change. They focus on what's strong, not what's wrong with the person. And that's what we love about it. Next slide. I think that when we think about peers, we think about these relationships as someone who has shared the same experience as me, is respectful, is empathetic, is open-minded. Our relationships are honest. They're mutual, and they're direct and reciprocal. Next. I think for me, over the years and watching other peer support programs, sometimes people want to help, but they're a little too wounded themselves. I don't know if you've ever been in a group and maybe the leader ends up talking more about themselves than the rest of the group because they're still going through their own journey. I think that, many of us have wounds that are deep. We have triggers in our lives that can sort of open up those wounds again. And so I think we need sort of guidance on how to be a good peer and how to manage our own well-being as we're holding up someone else. The concept of you can't pour from an empty jug, you're putting that oxygen mask on if the plane's going down on yourself first to help somebody else. So it's thinking about the challenges in peer support, that made me want to develop this new nonprofit. Next. I think also, you know, I'm very big on evidence-based practices. I know Genevieve is also, and we as clinicians, it's not that there isn't a lot of cool stuff out there on the internet, but I think it's important to use models and services, especially around our mental health and our peer support, that are evidence-based, that are, you know, clinically sound, that are researched and sort of effective, and that partnerships like the Volunteer My Goal partnerships are essential. Next. I think for me, when I think about peer support, I don't think about it as one moment in time. You know, people used to say, someone would call one of our lines and say, I'm in crisis, you know, my child's just been diagnosed, or we're transitioning to 21, or I had my first seizure, or, you know, whatever. And that's just a snapshot. You know, peer support, we can be there for each other in the crisis, but we really want to be there in a preventative way. We want to be there in a consistent intervention, and we want to be there after the crisis, like a continuum of support. Next. I think when I think about, you know, why peer support is so powerful, I love this Dalai Lama quote. One of the most important things you can do on this earth is to let people know that they are not alone. You know, so many times people have said to me, oh, you know, I really am, you know, amazed that you've been in this work with trauma and suicide and people with challenges your whole life. And I think, why are you surprised that I'm doing this? I'm inspired on a daily basis, because people are inspiring when they're connected and when they're overcoming something. And that's what I think peer support is. Next. So really quickly, I'm going to go through the model. We're going to have a training in January where many of you, Genevieve will guide you, will be able to attend the more formal training. But I think what we understand at Volunteer is, in order to do good peer support, we must be able to reflect and have our own self-awareness before we connect, so we know what we're sharing and what we're bringing. I used to tell the story that if I talked about my son and our family's challenges, it was a long story. You know, it started, you know, with the first series of diagnoses and those crazy appointments we all go through, and the shock and the grief and the loss. And then, you know, it's ending with a happy ending, but with still, you know, many challenges. I don't want to make it sound too rosy over here. But I think I came to understand that to reflect on my story, I needed to sort of focus in, what have I gleaned from my experience as a special needs mom that I could share with somebody else to help move them forward. And I think just sort of editing myself and saying, I think for me, the biggest thing was that my faith was one of my biggest resilience tools. And my son's disability challenged my faith and my belief in God momentarily. I think that it affected my mental health, and I needed to get help. And I think that was really important to be honest about. Even as a mental health clinician, I needed that help myself with what I was going through with our family and my son's challenges. And that I think also that, you know, it has evolved into, although a roller coaster of joys and heartache, you know, it has become the biggest blessing of my life. And so to be able to just sort of focus in on, you know, the impact on my mental health, my family, you know, my faith, and then, you know, how I am in this moment is important to reflect on before I connect. We also want to collect information from each other. Sometimes we sort of get lost in our own stories, or we get little pieces of people's story. You know, they say there's his, hers, and the truth, you know, to maybe ask people questions to understand more about what's going on with them, their child, their family, their resources, to really be able to help them more comprehensively is very important. So I teach people how to collect information. That praise can like lift us up so much. I mean, we know that in our spirituality and in how God loves us. But I think when we praise each other and we hold each other up, it's really powerful, more so than from a stranger or someone who doesn't understand. And then I think this handoff, I don't envision Volunteer or this collaboration being something that comes in and takes over. I think, you know, there's a time where we spend together to enhance what you're doing, and then sort of hand off back to let you take it from there for sustainability. Next. I think, you know, with peer support, it's cyclical. we have to be willing to share our stories. You know, I always wonder when people run groups or do peer support and they seem like they have it all together. I'm always suspicious. You know, I say, how come you seem so good? Where was your moment? You know, we have to be willing to be vulnerable and be open and be authentic when we offer ourselves to normalize someone else's situation, to really reduce their isolation and create that connection. I think there's a lot of value in silence. You know, so many people have mom-to-mommed or volunteered or helped me, whatever word you want to use, you know, to just allow me to cry on the phone or in person and just be silent and receive, you know, my emoting is such a gift. So there's a lot of ways for us to be present. Next. I think, you know, around that idea, this is a great Brene Brown, who I love, video about the difference between empathy and sympathy. And so I just want us to check it out for a moment. Genevieve?
So what is empathy and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
I think that's so true. And I love how briefly but profoundly Brene Brown allows us to see that, you know, just being present with someone is so important. You know, sometimes we tell people, if you're going to reflect or connect and you're on the phone or you're on a live face group thing or chatting or even face to face, you know, like allowing yourself to really not be distracted, you know, allowing for like the sacredness of your time to be present with someone is so powerful. So, you know, we begin with connection by reflecting on, are we ready to really hear someone and receive them? Next slide. I think, you know, the next part about reflection and connection is that we're all like distracted now. So we call these listening blocks. And, you know, I jokingly say, I think I have all of them on any given day. But, you know, we're distracted by our phones. We compare what people tell us to our own experience. We think we're mind readers. You know, we cut people off when they're speaking to finish their sentences to sort of speed up the process in our busy lives. We rehearse. We want to always say and do the perfect thing. So we're sort of half listening because we're preparing what we're going to say back to the person while they're still talking. We filter and daydream sometimes because we don't slow down. We judge. I'm famous for that one. We think we're making a threshold diagnosis every single conversation when we're really just judging. We identify, sometimes over-identify. We advise. Many of us as peers hear another family or another parent going through a challenge we've experienced, and we want to solve that. We want to spare them of the pain that we've been through. So we tell them what to do. We have to respect and allow them to process their experience, no matter what, and not advise too much. We derail them and we placate them. Sometimes we tell people what they want to hear because we feel sorry for them in moments of strife. Next. I think that when we reflect on what do we have to offer when we are being peers, when we're being, sisters and brothers to each other in my goal, or a mom to mom kind of exchange, or parent to parent exchange, we have to think about, where we're at in this moment. We want to normalize and not judge people, but we want to understand that if we're authentic and share where we're at, that will create a foundation for change. Next. I think, building the reflection is all about active listening. Again, we talk about this in depth in my volunteer training that will be in January, but, just some quick tips we tell people, don't ask closed-ended questions, or questions that have like a negative. So don't ask a question like, oh, I know you were going to the doctor last week. Did you go? Well, the answer can be yes or no. That's a very different question than saying, tell me about your experience last week. I know you had a doctor's appointment. So allowing people open-ended questions to share, what they're saying. I find with families with special challenges, restating and reflecting what people say is so important, because I know for me, I so often felt misunderstood. Unfortunately, by my extended family, by professionals, by teachers, by a lot of people, I felt misunderstood. So being able to reflect back what you're hearing as a peer is really important. No at least, again, my culture is, I'm Italian. We kind of give food as part of our love. And so the joke would be, I would talk to a mom and then say, and I have food for you, let me feed you, on top of giving you hugs and comfort. But we can't at least people, we can't try to cheer them up like the perennial cheerleaders, for special challenges. We have to be authentic and love people as we serve them. Next. I think, this part about collecting information, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but I do think that 1 out of every 3 people in our country now is experiencing some real mental health challenges. So are our young people. And there's a lot of comorbidity between our children and young adults and mental health challenges, especially based on social isolation. So I think we need to really be asking hard questions about suicide and about substance abuse and about, rumination and things that make people really feel like they're alone, to get them professional help, because peer support is not the professional help that someone needs if they have a much more acute problem. It's just a partner to sort of walk that journey with you to get you there. Next. So we share different kinds of tools in the training, things that help people, understand how to ask questions and not feel like you're invading someone's space. Next slide. I'm going to go through these quickly, Genevieve. This is a cage questionnaire. This is just an example of a tool that some clinicians use that, have you ever felt you should cut down on drinking? Have you been angry or annoyed by anything someone said about your drinking? Have you felt guilty about your drinking? And have you needed an eye opener? These kinds of tools aren't tools to say like, oh, now you're an alcoholic, or this QPR is question, persuade, and refer if someone's considering suicide, like CPR. These are not tools to say you are now a doctor or by any means doing an assessment. If you're speaking to someone, it's just a tool to allow you to get them to professional help. Confidentiality is important. And we want to, when we talk to people about their challenges, we also want to talk to them about their strengths. Next slide. I think as we're coming to a close here, we think about how to build in wellness and resilience and our mind-body connection. And because of the work of my goal, we get to really sort of languish in our spiritual wellness and use our spirituality as a resilience tool. So We have all kinds of plans and affirmations that have spirituality as a dimension to build each other up. Next. That's sort of task 3, if I'm going to be specific. And these are the 8 dimensions of wellness that SAMHSA uses nationally to think about our whole selves. You know, so many times I think of myself as just a mom or just a clinician or just a wife or, you know, in one dimension, but we are emotional, financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, intellectual, and environmental beings in terms of our wellness. And we need to attend to that holistic view of ourselves when we think about our resilience. Next. So we make plans. They're based on, you know, what the people we're speaking to want. You know, if I don't want to go walk 10 miles a day and you do, that's okay. You might want to pray more. Next slide. And in some of that, we use tips and tricks. We use SMART goals, which is just a way to create goals together. Next slide. This is one of my favorite ones. A very cool book, if you haven't read it, it's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about if we want to make change, we can take little teeny actions that allow us to change our intentions for our lives and identify with a new way of being with small habits. Next slide. So he talks about, in one of his chapters, James Clear just really quickly mentions that we can do things like habit stacking. And again, there's videos, there's, you know, stuff here that you can dig into, but habit stacking is a really easy one. He says, you know, you're going to use a document to say, what do I do every day? Every day I wake up, thank the Lord, I brush my teeth, I drink my coffee. And when I think about my regular routine, I'm not doing anything without coffee. I don't know about the rest of you, but I love my caffeine. So what I'll do is I say, this is something that I do no matter where I am. And he says, okay, if you do that every day, you're going to habit stack. Pick a new habit, very small, that you can connect to your coffee drinking, since that's something you always do. Next slide. So he offers little tips on how to think about your habits. You know, what do you do in your daily routine? Next slide. And then he says, stack something onto that so that you can be stronger. So I wanted to pray more. So I stacked a prayer onto 3 times a week after my coffee, and it's working. But these are little things that we can do. Resilience is a model. You know, we all have our different skills. You're not born resilient or not resilient. We have our nature, but we can develop our resilient skills. So these are some of the resiliency skills that we'll work on together in our peer support. Next. And I think, you know, as we hold each other up, we should think about, you know, that we are very good at bouncing back from adversity. We are naturally resilient. So this is a task in our 4th task of the volunteer model that's really easy for our families. Next. You can just jump ahead. And I think what I want to get to is that, next slide, please, that, you know, the reason for us providing praise and affirmation and, you know, peer support and connection is that, you know, wherever 2 or more are gathered, there will be. And what, you know, we all understand, and certainly Genevieve more than I understand the scripture, but we are really a resource to each other that we could tap into so much more than we do. You know, I know for myself, I tend to sort of, you know, feel like I'm in control of a lot of things a lot of times, and I'm very good at giving, but I'm not always good at receiving. And what I think the grace of the fire was for me was to allow myself to receive and let that fuel my ability to give more, and let that be cyclical. So this year, Volunteer and my goal are together. We have a gala on March 10th. I'll be connected to all of your work, but in January, there will be a free training, virtual and in person, for those of you at My Goal to join. I hope to work together with Genevieve and with all of you in the year ahead, as we transform and heal and support each other. And thank you so much for the time together.
Wow, Cherie, this is amazing. I am so grateful for the opportunity to partner with you. Truly, it's an answer to prayer. It's an answer to prayer because this journey that we've been walking. I share with people that I said, one of my favorite portion of scripture. So for many of you who are watching, by faith, I'm a believer in Christ, and I live and walk what the Bible tells me. And that's the reason why I do this job. So if you think I do it because I really want to do it, no, it's because my creator created me to do this. And I'm held accountable to all my family and friends to continue to work. We believe that I didn't choose this job. He chose me to do the job. God chose me to do it. And he chose me because he gifted me with an amazing young man who needs supports. And so as we walk the journey, we had to realize that there are moments where no matter how strong on the outside we look, on the inside we're struggling. And Cherie, you had texted me a poem the other day about the fight. And I put it on my social media pages yesterday because it was just so, I think I'm going to try to find it and read it out loud. And just because I want to affirm to everyone why what she's sharing here is important. And it went to the fact of, I think the hardest part of having a child with a delay of any kind is the fight for services, the fight for knowledge, because knowledge is power, the fight for people to understand who your child is and what they need, and the quiet fight you have within yourself, wondering if you've left no stone unturned. I got that, and I was just like, that is exactly what the journey has been and continues to be. And then when I posted it on my social media post, I said, this is why my goal exists, so that you don't have to fight alone. And you can then somebody can affirm you and say, yes, you are doing everything you're supposed to do in this season. And so I believe that, and I validate the work you're doing by saying this volunteer is exactly that we are each other's accountability partner. We don't judge, and we learn to develop the skill set that's necessary to better support others. And we have done it organically without any formal training all this time. And so when you have people that can come alongside and can say, this is how you can do it and do it even better. And I'm honored that we can be a tool and be a vehicle that God can use. And so if you're listening and you're part of the family, you're invited to be at the table where you can truly learn the best way you can to be a support to someone else, and then in turn receive the support. And I shared earlier how I had turned to Cherie. Some may not know it, but we had a health crisis about 7 years ago for Nick, and I didn't know where to go. And, I reached out. We went through another year like this year, where we were trying to transition from childhood to adult, and that also became a struggle. So I reached out to other people. So when she talks about resilience, it comes from the place where you are open to receiving. I really had to call out my pastors and my prayer leaders and say, please pray for me, because I really don't know. I'm at my wit's end again. Some of you here knew that I said one or twice I had to cancel our meetings because I was in the emergency room with Nick, right? So I had to learn how to say, as much as I want to have this event and I need to support him, right? And I did that because I knew that we had support system built in, but you have to continue to grow that support. We have to continue to expand that support. We have to continue to expand that network. And so if you're listening, I want you to know that this is part of you getting the supports that you need, because we all have an expiration. As you heard the speaker earlier, I forget her name, Cherie, who the video that we watched from Channel 4, I think that was her name.
Karen Swenson. Yeah.
Karen, right. When she talked about her husband and the expiration and, his transition, I work with cancer patients, and I tell you, when you get that diagnosis, 1 minute you think your life is fine, and the next minute your whole life, has changed. For those of us who care for special ones, that's what happens. Cherie, you're talking about a trauma of surviving a fire. Your whole life, what, many take for granted is all that you've accumulated. Your life stories, moments that was taken away from you in a hot moment. Those things happen, and they unfortunately, and we all will face one challenge of the other. So what we do is we create networks. You lay the foundation. I call it, you lay the tracks down now, like a train that will pass. The tracks are there. So when the need is there for a train, another train to come through, there is a place for it to get through. And I believe that that's what this peer support are. It's going to be the volunteer association with her organization. So we're excited, and I'm just thrilled, just thrilled.
Me too. Me too. And
Uh,
the scripture, I am the vine, you are the branches, right, my friend?
Yeah, yeah,
This is how we grow.
yeah.
And the spirit that my goal has sustained over all these years is just remarkable. And it comes from the gifts that God gave you, but it comes from all of these people in your My Goal family, right? Who continue when I went to your events, and they're just full of joy and love and spirit. And it doesn't mean that we don't have the hard times, but yeah, I prayed you into my life more actively once again, and all of the My Goal families. And my prayer is that I'm able to serve all of you and connect and just do as much as I can to be around you in your spirit, because that blessing I need it as much as I want to give it, and I am very, very looking forward to it. So 2023 is our year. This is just the beginning. And again, I can't thank you enough for the chance to kind of introduce myself to the family and to the listeners, and hope it will be an ongoing thing moving forward.
Absolutely. So we'll open it up if there's any questions, Chris or Pat or Ade, if you guys have any questions for Cherie. I mean, you heard her story even about her son. One of the things I always tell new families is that just because you get a diagnosis, that person who's giving you the diagnosis is limited in their capability of what the future for your child may be. And it's important that we realize that they have potential, and our job is to give it 100%. So can you just touch briefly on the walk and the journey of being able to sustain and look for services and supports, and just so that, for someone who's listening, they can be encouraged by that? Because oftentimes people, I know within some of the faith community, people don't want to accept a diagnosis, quote unquote.
Yes.
So they end up living in denial.
Yes.
Versus saying, I don't care what diagnosis they've given it. I'm just
Yes.
about the support that I need for them.
Yes. And so if it's okay, if I could share some reflections there, early on in my journey, it affected my marriage, my family, my mental health, all those things, like I said, but most profoundly, my faith. And I ended up one day watching the movie, The Passion of the Christ. And there was a moment in that film where Mary, and again, I don't mean to offend anyone with my faith story, I'm just sharing, but where Mary, sees Jesus fall carrying the cross, and she has a flashback of when he was a little boy, and she's in the crowd, and she remembers him falling when he was a small child and scraping his knee, and she picks him up and she rocks him and she says, I'm here. And I remember thinking, when my son couldn't speak and he was sick and I didn't know what was wrong with him, I didn't know what to do. And I thought, there's what I should do. I should just pick him up and say, I'm here. And that the ministry of my presence, I thought I had to do all these things. And I really didn't. I just needed to accept that my presence was enough in those moments, even if I couldn't communicate with him. And as he got older, and as I, received more supports and more graces, and tried to serve other families more, I noticed, I'm going to keep it real, Genevieve, that I felt like people wanted me to sort of subjugate my expectations, or kind of like, don't expect a lot, if he's speaking and he's functioning, be happy, kind of like, don't dream big, don't allow for the bold dreams that God, encourages us to have for the stories of our lives, but just accept if he's not sick, if he's not in crisis, if he doesn't have a seizure, just sort of accept, a non-crisis moment. And so lots of doctors and lots of practitioners gave me like very bad information. And I believed them. You know, someone's a doctor, you believe them. But then I started to think, wow, there's something going on here that, you know, if I believe more for my son, he is going to do more. And so because of his language barriers, he used writing a lot as a way to communicate and developed his writing. And he ended up, you know, getting published his freshman year of college with an essay. And like I said, he works and just did a fellowship to create a special needs connection for college students. But he always says he believed that God felt like, you know, special people were the ones everybody should try to be like his points to be where, you know, Mom, when people say someone's disabled or has special needs, I always think they're the smartest one. Like he would say, you know, I think people who don't have challenges don't understand how to value their lives. So his wisdom, you know, and a child shall lead us, has always been sort of feeding my soul. But there are moments when the challenges and the processing is painful, and we question, you know, what does every life phase mean? You know, will we be married? Will we have jobs? Will we function independently or not? And so it's not that it's easy. It's just that it is, you know, full and enriching. And I say mothers and fathers' instincts are always right. You know, we know our children. So advocate and be fierce. And I know that's what people do in my goal. But I think that we get limited by our own fears. At least I did. And we need to release those and trust God.
Wow. Well, I mean, this is Dominic you were talking about, right?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, as you're talking already, my brain always goes. I'm like, I would love for him to come and share his work.
Yes.
Just because I need to see that God's creation, when it's nurtured,
Yes.
when encouraged,
yes,
blossoms.
Yes.
And so we need to see that. And, you know, as she's talking, Pat, I'm thinking about Michael, you know, so Pat is one of our families, and this young man is brilliant. And I, you know, so I'm just hoping that connection can be made. And that goes to tell us again that each individual is endowed with gifts and talents, and we just be able to kind of unearth it and bring it out. So I am so grateful and thankful for this realignment.
Yes.
Because it's seasonal, right?
Yes.
I wrote a devotional, for some people may know this. It's called 7 Principles to Developing and Maintaining Your Passion. And in there, I really talk about I took the word passion and broke it apart, PASSION. You know, P is perception, perceiving what it is that God has called you to be. A is assessment, and assessing what it's going to take you to get to where you need to get that done. S is identify your supporters. And I determined that there are a number of supporters that God has given us, what I call your core supporters, you know, folks that are they're like your pillars that I alluded to earlier. I also identify what I call seasonal supporters, people who come in at a time and they leave after a while. And then, you know, and then there are the people who are just there, like they're your everyday people, your family, your husband, your children. They're along the journey. They don't have a choice, but they're there. So those are your supporters, and identifying them for what they are. And then the other S is share your story. Share it, be authentic about it, share what it is has been placed in your heart. And I is insights. You got to get insights about the season and what's going on around you. Always be organized. You can't expect to really get things done and just be haphazard about it. And it's network. So that was 7 Principles to Developing your Passion. I would love to share that book with you, Cherie. But I wrote that book, believe it or not, on a plane to Ghana, right? I shared this story. Today, I don't know, it's full of stories. I was led, this is back in 2010. I was reflecting, it was around December, and I just felt led that I needed to be in Ghana. I needed to be there in April, similar to what we're talking about here. And I don't know, it's just a voice that said, okay, you need to really connect back to your roots, to where you're originally from. And it had been over 13 years since I'd been back. And so my husband is like, okay, all right, if you say you got to go, go. Supportive as always. And I got on the plane, and while I was going, I said, when I go to this country, I want to go on TV. Now, mind you, how I was going to do that, in what capacity I was going to do that, I didn't know. But on that same airplane trip is when I got this revelation of writing this devotional, 7 Principles Developing Your Passion, taking that terminology. And when I did go to Ghana, by the way, I did end up on TV, on national TV. I was there for a period of time, and I got there and I was able to share my story. I was able to talk about all these things that we talk about here. And that is the beginning of how we birthed Haven International, the international arm to our organization. And now where we have a school and we're doing all these things. And it was just being true to the voice that said, do something about your pain and use your pain to really inspire and encourage and transform lives. And I believe that we began to transform a nation as a result of that. And I shared that to make the point that there are core supports. And in each season of life, God brings you to people and aligns you. So that's why I made the comment earlier that you are a core pillar and support. And so, folks, Cherie is a force to be reckoned with internationally. And she's saying, come along on this journey with us, and you have access to her, and you have access through our team, so that you can get the necessary tools that you need to continue to press on. And I want to encourage each one of you that if you get the tools that you need, you'll be able to leave a legacy. And that legacy is the child that you've been given, or the peer support that you're going to provide. And people are going to leave you inspired and encouraged better than they met you. And you're going to be inspired and encouraged when you leave them. And this is why we're doing what it is. And I know we're sounding very preachy today, but I just know that there's something that is stirring up, and I'm like, whoa. So something stirred up today.
I feel it too. Yes. Amen. I'm right there with you.
So that goes to tell you that we can modulate the conversation and whatever. Put me in a room full of people talking about, cancer research and treatments, and we will be able to talk the conversation, and then put us in a room and do one-on-one conversation, and we can do that too and be real and authentic. And I think that's really what we're going to. So earlier this year, I decided that I wanted to go back basics, Cherie, and for new parents that are just getting that horrific diagnosis that, okay, you're going to have to work twice as hard as everybody else. We were going to try to do some things with them. And so that's really where we are. There are people who are in the infancy stages of their beginning of identifying their trauma, that something traumatic has happened to them, and their expectations that they had has now been shifted and changed. And so that's a little bit of where we are in a cycle of what my goal is doing right now. So we may have different people at different stages of the life cycle of their journey. And so I'm excited that you're lending your expertise to us, and also be able to inspire those who are questioning whether their child can go to college. Her son went to college.
Yes.
And so
yes. And is going to be graduating and is going to go to graduate school. And yes, praise God, all of that. And I think it's important to hear those stories. And I know I heard those stories 20 years ago when he was a year old. So, and that gave me some hope. And so, yes, we need to continue to do that. And I think every cycle of this journey has gifts and challenges, but I love that there's a season of people coming who we can serve. So again, such a blessing to be with you.
Absolutely. Do anybody on here have any questions for Cherie? Nothing. Don't be shy. This is your opportunity. We want to just, there are folks that are watching with us in the Zoom room. So if you're here and you say, hey, Cherie, I have a question, we'll take it. Certainly, we'll share the link back to you guys also. You can go back and watch some of those videos. And if you're interested in being a part of the group as we're starting in January, we'll give you more details about that. Please just, indicate that in our WhatsApp group or email us info@mygoalinc.org. In 2 weeks also, we are going to be having our gala event. We do it October 22nd. There are people who have donated free tickets if you're interested in being a part of that day, including the Pines Manor. They been a strong partner, and they really love our families, and they want people. So Cherie, if you know families that are interested in attending, there's music, there's dance. We have folks that are going to be dancing. We have a group called the MJ Expressions. These are individuals, adults who impersonate Michael Jackson and dance to his song. And the moment
wonderful.
where they do We Are the World, and it's just beautiful. So we're just excited. And, I get joy. I'm not Italian by any means, but I believe in just like bringing food and good food and music and dance. And just really, I get a high just seeing people getting excited and people dancing. So I want my families out there to be a part of that. So just email us, info@mygoalinc.org. We'll love for you to be a part of that night, October 22nd. Don't be afraid of COVID. We're going to have a good time. COVID is wanting to just keep us from having seen each other, but we're going to do it. So I want you to be a part of that night. And obviously, like we said, there's more to come, January. And then Cherie's also Gala is coming up in March 2023. Please plan for it. My Go families will be there at that event as well, too. We just form a community and we support each other. So this is all part of that bit. I don't see any questions that have been asked, but Cherie, I know there's going to be more. And we're going to get Dominic back, y'all, because I love to hear from the horse's mouth. You heard it from Mom. I want to hear from him. So
yes. And he'll love to tell you. He tells you he's going to define special and teach people about what they need to understand about how magnificent everyone is who's differently abled. So yes, he'll love to be on your.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it already. And so on that note, we want to thank all of you for being here tonight. It's just such a joy to have this amazing expert with us today as the expert. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts you heard, things that you're just burning in your heart, please email us and we'll be able to connect you to Cherie, of course, and to myself, whatever we can do, so that as she said earlier, you are enough. You're enough. And sometimes we just feel like we're not doing enough. You're doing it, and you can continue to do it and be encouraged in that way. So we love you. We want you to just be blessed. Tune in on Thursday for our social hour at 7 p.m. This is for the families. Same, just register for that. And then also October 22nd, as I mentioned, is our gala. And then the last Thursday in October, join me back for Empowerment Moment. Who knows what we'll be talking about? All I know is that I just want you to be blessed and beyond blessed. And it's been such a joy this afternoon, Cherie. Absolutely one of my favorite moments today. So I know there'll be more. You're going to see more of this woman. I know God has just designed it for that purpose. You're going to be saying, oh my God, it's Genevieve again. She's come again. People, that's why people say G-Force. I've met all kinds of people and brought them to Ghana. I just like, hey, do you want to go to Ghana?
I'll go to Ghana. I'm telling you.
Okay, are you sure? All right, you guys, you just heard it here. All the Haven team members, Cherie's coming to Ghana. We don't know when yet, but she is. That's what I do. I'm like, you want to go to Ghana? We're thinking about going to other nations. We're going to go to Liberia next. Just because, and then obviously go to Nigeria. Our goal, God has just sent us a mandate to get to places where there's really no resources at all. We have resources here. There are places that are no resources at all. So we want to be able to get there. So yes, I did great. You're going to be one of our flags member of that team. So not to worry. On that note, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Stay blessed. I loved it. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.